This is one of the strangest military operations in history. It started with a tree and almost ended in war. You're watching the lost chapters where forgotten stories come to life.
It started with a tree, not a missile, not a bomb, a poplar tree on the banks of the Korean DMZ. On August 18, 1976, American soldiers, accompanied by South Korean troops, entered the Joint Security Area, a thin strip of land between North and South Korea, on a routine task: trimming a tree. The poplar had grown tall enough to obscure the view between two UN checkpoints. For security reasons, it had to be pruned. But that morning, as the men began their work with axes, something went horribly wrong. A group of North Korean soldiers approached. They demanded the pruning stop immediately. Tension rose. Then, without warning, the North Koreans attacked with pipes, clubs, and fists. When the chaos ended, two American officers, Captain Arthur Boniface and Lieutenant Mark Barrett, lay dead, beaten to death under the branches of the poplar. The incident shocked the world, and what happened next was one of the most overwhelming shows of force for the pettiest of reasons. Operation Paul Bunyan.
In the hours after the killings, the U.S. was on high alert. The incident wasn't just tragic, it was an insult. The Korean DMZ had always been tense, but now emotions boiled over. And President Gerald Ford, alongside his generals, faced a terrifying question. How do you respond to a brutal attack over a tree? A full-scale war was out of the question, but doing nothing would show weakness. The U.S. needed a response that was loud, clear, and just short of catastrophic. So they planned a massive military operation codenamed Operation Paul Bunyan, after the mythical lumberjack known for chopping down trees the size of skyscrapers. It wasn't just about removing a tree anymore. It was about proving a point. You don't kill American soldiers without consequences. The scale of the response? Unprecedented. Helicopters, jet fighters, B-52 bombers, soldiers with chainsaws, all coordinated to take down a single tree in the most dramatic way possible.
August 21, 1976, 3 days after the murders. The sky above the Korean DMZ was dark, not from weather, but from the shadow of American bombers. Operation Paul Bunyan was underway. At exactly 7 a.m., engineers with chainsaws approached the now infamous poplar tree. They were surrounded by a security force of South Korean commandos and American soldiers, all heavily armed, ready for anything. Overhead, B-52 bombers circled. They weren't just there for intimidation. They were loaded with bombs. Nearby, aircraft carriers sat off the coast. F-4 Phantom jets screamed across the sky. Even nuclear-capable forces had been moved into position. North Korea watched all of this from just meters away. The world held its breath. The tree was cut down in 42 minutes, but every second felt like it could spark war.
While chainsaws buzzed, North Korean soldiers stood just across the bridge, staring. They didn't interfere, not this time, but they were armed. American snipers had their rifles trained across the DMZ. Artillery units stood ready. Attack helicopters hovered overhead. US and South Korean forces numbered in the hundreds, all just for one tree. But the operation had another purpose. A message was delivered to North Korea. If they ever tried something like this again, the response would be full war. After the tree fell, its stump was left behind deliberately. A small metal plaque was installed that read, "In memory of the men who died here." North Korea blinked. After Operation Paul Bunyan, the North issued a rare statement. They expressed regret over the incident. Not quite an apology, but close. It was a stunning development. In a regime known for defiance and aggression, this was different. Some believe the overwhelming show of American force worked. Others think the North was simply buying time. But what's clear is this: North Korea had never seen a reaction like this. They didn't retaliate. They didn't escalate. They watched and learned. The US had drawn a red line, not over missiles or spies, but over a tree. And the message landed like a bomb.
Let's be honest. On the surface, it sounds absurd. The US launched one of the largest military operations of the decade over landscaping. But Operation Paul Bunyan wasn't really about a tree. It was about credibility, power, saving face in one of the most dangerous geopolitical standoffs of the 20th century. This wasn't just a show of force for North Korea. It was a message to the world. The US would not be pushed around. And strangely, it worked. No shots were fired. The North backed down, and a war that could have erupted over a poplar tree was averted. But the image remains. A chainsaw crew surrounded by hundreds of armed troops cutting a tree while bombers circle overhead. Operation Paul Bunyan, the pettiest and most serious flex in modern history.
Today, there's no trace of the tree at the DMZ, just an empty spot where it once stood, and a small plaque that few ever see. But Operation Paul Bunyan lives on as a symbol of deterrence, overreaction, and Cold War absurdity. It's taught in military academies as an example of controlled escalation. And it's studied in political science as a moment where symbolism became strategy. The soldiers who died were honored. The tree was forgotten, and the world moved on. But for one moment, in August 1976, the entire world looked at the Korean peninsula and waited. Not for missiles, not for tanks, but for the sound of a chainsaw.
History is full of stories like this, strange, powerful, and forgotten. If you want, hit subscribe and never look at history the same way again.